People are not reporting against the indicators. People are holding meetings and they said we have delivered. But delivery is something else. We should see the needle moving. So this particular summit, if you saw the first slide, it's speaking on accountability, acceleration, amplification now. We're saying let's revisit. What are people doing? Where are we winning? Where are we losing? Why? If the provinces, even in the 9 provinces, there's summits, what is happening in the 9 provinces that is different from each other? The nuances of GBV. Is it the same? Is it different? Is it all alcohol in 9 provinces, or is it something else that is driving GBV? Hence, we had the 9 summits as well. In the first summit, we came out with a declaration. A declaration was signed not only by the president, but by 9 other civil society members. The funny lady there in Pels is me. I signed as well. The declaration is ensuring that this process that we have embarked on in 2018 doesn't end even when administration changes. It is not Mr. Ramaphosa or President Ramaphosa's GBV summit. It is a presidential summit. Whoever is sitting in that seat would need to continue where people have left off, or the previous administration have left off. And that is very key, that when we fight for these things, we should remember it's not about any administration. It's all about the cause that we're fighting. We say GBV affects everybody. It affects business, it affects the churches, it affects our homes, it affects people who are dealing with shelters, and. How then do we get the whole country to respond? The vision or the overview of the NSP was to get us to a free South Africa. How do we get there? If you think it's government because they are the primary implementers and you do not see your role, you think you need to find your role, because there is a role for everybody. Sometimes when civil society is fighting for resources, for representation, thinking, I cannot represent you because I do not speak for you, when we do not have an umbrella body in the country of civil society, it's so difficult. But what I know, when I'm standing here, every corner of South Africa has a challenge, and you can find a little corner to do, the change that is required. We do not have to fight for anything. Yes, there's little resources, but I'm saying the work that needs to be done is in every street, in every township, in every suburb, in every little district, in every province, and in the whole country. We are afraid of going out. If you are afraid of going out and you are an adult, what about somebody who's younger than you? This is in the NSP itself. Those who have been invited in the summit will be getting the hard copies. I have a lot of these. They've been sitting there because of COVID. I have posted to some organizations. I think, Zubeida, you did get a few boxes as well a few years ago or last year. Those who still need copies, please send messages so that I can give you the hard copy of the NSP. The NSP has got 6 pillars. The first pillar speaks to accountability, coordination, and leadership, which is what we're focusing on with this particular summit. We're saying to our ministers, our premiers, our heads of departments, what have you been doing? Tell us. We will look at what the NSP says they should have done in the first 2 years and what they are doing. Are they doing their own thing or working towards the roadmap that we all agreed to? Because the NSP is our roadmap. So every time when we come up with programs as well, within our centers, we should also remember that we are working using this roadmap. Shelters are under Pillar 4, but sometimes you find yourself having to do work for Pillar 3. There's been change in policy early last year. How has it affected the work you're doing? Are you able to now use the online application of protection orders for the women that are coming through your shelters? Are you still finding challenges? What are the challenges? Bring them forward. We've invited Department of Justice, all their subdivisions to be part of that, to tell us, to say, why are women struggling with maintenance? What are you doing to fast-track maintenance? Because it's also a burden to women who've been kicked out. We've also been saying, why is always women the ones that are leaving homes? Why are there no shelters for men so that men can live? And the one who's carrying the burden of raising 3, 4 kids can stay. I was told in 2018 that by 2021, they said there's one in Gauteng men's shelter, there will be 8, one in each province. I'm yet to see them. And yes, I work in the office of the president, and yes, I do say these things. So we are trying to harness an all-society response with this particular one. We're looking at the first segment. There will be a plenary, there will be report backs from all levels of the state, including civil society. We also get funding as civil society members, and we're saying, are you reporting against the funding that you are receiving? Or is your report coming as an afterthought? Because now it's due. Whatever you can fill in as quickly as possible and submit. Or is it really speaking to your proposal? If I look at your proposal and what you are reporting, are they matching? There was going to be a clinic, several clinics. There's going to be action caucuses. There's going to be clinics. Clinics are going to focus on deeper understanding of different issues, obstetric violence, a clinic on TCCs, because a lot of cases are won through TCCs. If you look at the stats, they're standing around 90% of success rate when your case have gone through a TCC, rather than you have taken it, you've gone to a doctor, done that, filled a form. But if you go to that one-stop shop, normally the success rate is very high. So what are they doing? What are the best practices as well? We're going to be looking at that. What are the challenges as well? Because they've got challenges as well. I went to Island, Lusikisiki, last year, and we went to visit 2 TCCs, and we were shown others within Umtata and whatever that are stressed financially. The ceilings are falling. If you see where examinations are done, you'll be appalled. And this tug of war between NPA and health to say who's supposed to be looking after the TCCs, all those things need to be resolved. They are using their own resources. There's no laptops, there's no desktops. I went to the police station in Lusikisiki. They do not even have papers to take cases, the IOs. If a case comes in, they have to go and buy their own paper to take a case. There's 16 of them. There's so many villages. People who stay in the Eastern Cape, especially in that area, will tell you, and how vast the distance is from one village to the next. And we are expecting 16 people to take your case, to appear in court on time, and to also investigate. That's a miracle. People have been accepting money from the alcohol industry when there was a moratorium to say, let's not take it, let's ask them to be more responsible for what they are putting out there. We are asking our police to leave what they're supposed to be doing and also police alcohol Why are we not asking the alcohol industry to police themselves, to make sure that whatever the licensing, what is it called, board of whatever, is giving licenses to every second house now? Why? So those things, we need to try and mainstream and make it work for us, not burden the SAPS that is already overburdened. So the objectives of the summit is mostly to also make sure that GBV stays at this high level and the state is committed and the state is accountable. Civil society will help, business will also fund, NGOs will be hands-on, but we need the primary implementer to stay focused. We want to accelerate things that little pockets are doing and we can see there's a change. How do we take those and build on them? How do we take our research that is there, that is South Africa grown, work with that research and make sure that we expand on it? Because some of the research that we're using, some of the programs, the implementation programs, they're not South African grown. They're from somewhere. Some of the people who investigate our people and do research on our people, they don't even belong to those communities. But they've got so much to say about a community. How do we protect that? The LGBTQI community as well. The new research is going towards them. But people who are investigating that particular community, it's still not them. It's somebody else. So we are going to share different progresses and we are going to share nuances that would come through the different provinces to say, okay, this province and this province are the same. What lessons between the two, can we use? What are their challenges? Are they similar? Are they different? What can be introduced differently that could help change and move us forward? Collaboration as well is very key. The NGBV collective, those who participate in it, they have monthly meetings, and then within the pillars, there's work that is being done. I serve in Pillar 6 and Pillar 5, we've divided into two, sub-team that is called ILOC 190, which deals with sexual harassment at work. We pushed for the ratification of C190 because we thought they were taking too long, the department that was responsible. And as an implementer within NGBV, there's a lot of people sitting there. We've got people from DPSA, CGE, the new fund, GBV fund, different experts that are sitting there. And we all together started pushing for ratification. There's people who are sitting on the bigger Pillar 5. There's WeCorner. WeCorner is saying, how do we push preferential awarding of contracts for women? How do we bring more women into business and give them the opportunities, even in cross-border trade, in other things? There was a WeCorner. I hope some of you did attend. It's happening. It's brewed from Pillar 5. Pillar 6 is looking at research. We've got research now that is done by HSRC that is looking at the prevalence study. It's a prevalence study on GBV in the country. It's the first of its kind in the country. And it's through that pillar as well. We've got apps that are being created within the pillar as well to say, why is one department not talking to the other? Why are the systems not talking? How do we make the systems to talk? And find the thread instead of, filling the same form here and the same form here. If you remember again with protection orders, if you have a protection order in Joburg, sometimes it doesn't work in Pretoria. Here, next door, never mind KZN, you have to apply for a new one. How do we make sure that these systems are talking? This is a lot of work. It's not something that is going to be done overnight, but I'm saying these different groups have started. How do we also involve ourselves in that? So we're saying multi-sectoral ways of working have started. The PSPC that is putting together this particular summit, it's also multi-sectoral. We went back, we remembered that in the declaration we said 51%, 49%, and the structure is exactly 51%, 49%. It's hard, it's not easy. We had to raise money for this particular summit. Money was not given to the summit. And as I was the funder for the total shutdown, I am the funder for this as well. I'm the money maker. So the objectives of this summit, we need to see them through, those who are going to be there. It is not where we're going to network. It is where we're going to work, and then if there's opportunity to network, we'll do them over lunch. But we need to work. Like I said, the theme, whoever wrote this wrote it incorrectly. It's accountability, acceleration, and amplification now. We're saying there's no time to waste. We're left with 7 years of the roadmap. Our NSP has a period of 10 years. Are we able to make it? Are we going to see the change in 10 years, within the 10 years that has been prepared for this particular process? We've put in a number of pictures in this one. The first picture is the summit itself, the 2018 summit. And then it was sparked by the total shutdown. These are the 24 demands. And then the next year we had a declaration. And then this is a summit report. I know you can't see, this is an emergency. If you remember, there was also deliberations in the cabinet on whether they should support GBV. Is it important? Should they put a little bit of money? And I know this question always comes up, what happened to the 1.6 billion? Guys, there was no new money. Treasury didn't bring a bag of money. They asked different government departments, they said, are you able to shift money here and bring it here? And then look at these indicators and see how much you can do on these indicators. And I'll give an example with one, SEPS. They were supposed to tackle DNA, and they were supposed to tackle a lot of taverns that were there, to close down a lot of taverns, to fast-track DNA so that people can go to courts and to try and close down the tavern. So whatever was repurposed within SEPS did exactly that. So when you read the report, I wrote that report. When you read the report, it will tell you what were they supposed to do. Did they do it or not? And the only thing that is not there, because it took time for them to send in the figures of how much they spent. Some of the figures are there, some are not there. But there was no new money. I remember civil society came back and said, then what about us? NDA was brought in to put together a pocket of money for civil society, and people did apply, and some of you did get the money. So your portion went through that, and this one, no new money. If I hear somebody seriously asking me about 1.6 again, I'm going to die, because there was never money. So you know, there was never money. So then this is a summit. This is the NSP. This is the collaborative that I'm speaking about, where multi-sectoral, the red one, where multi-sectoral collaboration is. And within that, we started something that is called the 100-day challenge. The 100-day challenge is just, it was brought in by an institute called Rapid Response. They teach you to set a goal, a very unrealistic goal that you think you cannot achieve. And they bring you into the room. They've got different hierarchies, and people are happy, you know, they find themselves there, and then they tell you, no, you're just going to oversee, you're not going to do anything, you who are sitting here. You need to go to communities and find communities, different levels, police, justice, a nurse, a community worker, and a woman who stays at home, to work towards the goal that you have set. and see it through. And in 100 days, see if you can achieve it. If you see the results of these 100-day challenges, amazing. It's doable. It's unrealistic, but it's doable. Most of the people and areas who committed to this made it. And then, like I said, we're looking at what can we all account for, what will we accelerate, what can we amplify, and what needs to be strengthened. And then there's provincial summits, there's innovation labs, there's pillar dialogues. Pillar dialogues ended last week, where people were also discussing within their pillars challenges, and those who attended saw them. Within the funding dialogue was started again through our office, where we said, let's bring a different donors around the table. Let's ask EU, what have they been supporting in South Africa, like financial flows? How much did they bring into the country? Where did they take the money? What was the money aimed for? Was it looking at our strategy as a country, or was it focusing on their strategy? Because even donors can direct what you do. So we're looking at all that. That particular one is going to find itself again in the second summit, this funding dialogue. It's going to be under the clinics. I think it's an important conversation because a lot of civil society feel like they're not supported. And we've been integrating most of the work that we're doing with the DDM system that has been started already through government. We are not recreating things, we're finding ways of working with systems that are already there and improving on them. So provinces, what they've been looking at within the different summits, they've been looking at deeply understanding what is causing GBV, driving it within that province. And they've been looking at, are they implementing, and if they're implementing, what are the progresses, challenges, opportunities? And lastly, to see if they can work together. What will it change? What would it take for them to make the desirable changes? Pillar dialogues, like I said, it was open invitations. People were discussing within their pillar. You find yourself, the shelter is within pillar 4. If you wanted to attend any other one, you would. Research attended all of them because they were looking for opportunities to say, maybe we can research this. Let's go and listen and find opportunities and elements that we can start putting up research. The summit outcomes would help us describe again GBV in the country. Remember when we drafted the NSP, it was rushed because of Treasury as well to say, can we finish on this time so that we can maybe get a chance to be funded? Some of the things were left out. There's people who say, I can't see myself. I think I've been missed in this NSP. The outcomes would help us also through the clinics to say, we've neglected women who are having it hard when they're having babies because of the treatment that they're getting. We are struggling with drugs in the country. How do we align and bring them here? Because it's also one of the drivers of violence. What are we accelerating? What are we amplifying? What do we need to drop? Because if it's not working, leave it. Let's look for new things. And I hope this presentation makes sense. I think with GBV, nobody's an expert. If somebody calls themselves an expert of GBV, I always say they're liars, because then we wouldn't be in this state. We are all holding hands together and marching to and hoping that we will reach a solution together. And hopefully we will. Thank you very much. Questions? Oh, okay.
So we've got a mic here in front. Can someone just help with the roving, Deline? Thank you. I think I switch it off, Benny. So can we take a few questions? 2 questions. I'm getting told at the back and then we'll cut. I think
We are good.
we are good.
No, there's one there.
There's one there. Sorry. The lights are extremely bright. They so can't see properly. And you're sitting directly under the light. Thank you, Diane.
Thank you for that wonderful presentation. I think mine is a question around, there's currently the drafting of the next NSP for HIV, TB, and STIs. And we know some of the correlations between gender-based violence and HIV. Will that, are we communicating, are we ensuring that, that in NSP also looks at gender-based violence, the drivers of gender-based violence, so that, we can then see how, all the national documents, all the national strategic documents are speaking to one another, and they're also addressing issues that are critical within our communities.
Thank you. And Diane is chairperson of the NSM board. The last question, I see 2 questions. If not, then Zips, if you can respond to that.
Yeah, very crucial. SANEC has been part of conversations, and we also inviting them for one of the clinics that are going to be held during the summit, because we feel like there's so much that is aligning between the two, where we need to find each other and strengthen each other. So the answer would be yes. We got the hallelujah somewhere half the way, but there's too many hallelujahs that we've missed. Like I said, it was rushed, and sometimes there was no opportunity to bring in the other voices that needed to be in the room. And as soon as we recognize it, we bring that element into the room. Thank you.
Thanks. So, Sibs is leaving us now. I'm sure she has a very busy program, getting ready for Summit. So thank you very much for coming. And being here in person. Thanks. Why are you laughing? Right. Mariam, are we ready for the next speaker? Not yet. Is it? Are you gonna?
It wasn't me yet.
Okay.
But, that's fine.
Maybe just. Yeah, I'll find it out.
Is that the one?
No.
It can be.
I don't see. Mariam?
Can I connect it here? I can only connect it via that.
It's
Because I want to talk to it, it's going to be very brief.
okay.
Yeah. Unless, but yeah, because of the online team, we'll need to project it.
Do I see? You see yourself?
I don't see myself.
I don't see. Hi? Is she on?
Okay.
They're saying she's on. Can you email it to? Email to her. Okay. Thank you very much. So our next presentation is from NOMSA, Mbowani Nabu. She has experience of working in programs focused on gender discrimination, gender equality, and gender-based violence and femicide interventions. She has worked in different sectors like the Chapter 9 institution, non-government organizations, and now at the department. She currently works for the Department of Women, Youth and Persons, and the department focuses on monitoring and coordination of the National Strategic Plan on Gender-Based Violence and Femicide. Thank you very much, Nomsa. You can continue.
For having us for this interesting session. I have just joined. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Thanks.
Oh, perfect. Okay. Yes, we're really honored to be part of this session, discussing issues around shelters. And I've also briefly listened to the previous presentation that was made by SIPS. Thank you very much for the introduction. And as a result, this presentation I'm going to be presenting now, it's not really going to be focusing because my initial preparation, I just, in my initial slides, I gave basic information on the National Strategic Plan on Gender-Based Violence, Gender-Based Violence and Femicide. I think SIPS has done a very stunning work there. So I don't have to cover all my slides, okay? But basically, colleagues, I just want to give you a brief background with regards to what I'm going to be covering. I'm going to be giving brief information about Pillar 1. Pillar 1 focuses on accountability, coordination, and leadership. Pillar 1 of the National Strategic Plan on Gender-Based Violence and Femicide. So I'm going to be giving a brief information about that, and then you can see my presentation. Okay, so I'm going to be giving a brief information about Pillar 1 of the National Strategic Plan on Gender-Based Violence and Femicide, but specifically then focus on the work that we have been doing at province, district, and local level, with regards to the localization of the NSP, and in particular with regards to Pillar 1 on accountability, the structures that have been established there, and the role of the shelters, and basically the information we have received from shelters that are represented in those structures. So like I indicated earlier on, colleagues, I'm not going to go through the National Strategic Plan on Gender-Based Violence because I think you've done a lot of work, there's a lot of information that has already been presented there. So I'm going to skip the slide that covers vision, that covers principles, that covers the various pillars of the National Strategic Plan, that covers the implementation modalities, meaning the different structures, from national to province, to a district and local, in relation that are supposed to be established in relation to the NSP. I'm going to go straight to the information on Pillar 1, which focuses on accountability, coordination, and leadership. And they mainly focus on the work that is being done. What are the main interventions that are there? Basically, colleagues, Pillar 1, as I indicated earlier on, focuses on accountability, coordination, and leadership. And the outcomes there, the main outcome for Pillar 1 is all living in South Africa, including government, the private sector, the workplace, education and training institutions, civil society organizations, religious and cultural institutions are held accountable for building a safe, gender-based, violence-free and femicide-free environment. So you can see from here, colleagues, that this accountability is not only from government or from the private sector, of the civil society organization. All these institutions are expected to work together and hold each other accountable towards ensuring that South Africa has got an environment that is safe and is free from gender-based violence. The main intervention that I want to mention, and colleagues, these are not the only interventions that are under Pillar 1, but these are the interventions that are mainly related to the shelters at the local level. One of the main interventions that is there is the establishment of what we call multi-stakeholder gender-based violence and femicide coordination structures. We call them, they are called, I think even in the NSP, they are called gender-based violence and femicide rapid response teams. Okay. So it's the establishment of those structures. They are established at local level, local municipality level, at district level, and even at provincial level. They are supposed to be in place. And the purpose basically is to coordinate response to gender-based violence and femicide by all the key stakeholders, who are key in the fight against gender-based violence and femicide. So, so one of the interventions is the establishment of these structures, and ensure that rapid response. The purpose of the structures is to ensure that there is rapid response that is, provided to victims of gender-based violence. I think colleagues here, we all understand that at the moment there is, there is challenge when it comes to response, adequate and holistic response when it comes to someone who is reporting gender-based violence. So the purpose of these multi-stakeholder structures that are made up of both government, that is government departments, civil society organizations, is to ensure that there is quick coordination of response to make sure that whenever there's a victim, adequate response is given, whether it be in the form of the police, the response from the Tutuzela Care Center, the response from the social workers, it's to make sure that these structures are in place and there is continuous and immediate communication between these structures whenever there is a victim that needs to be serviced. So what I'm saying here, colleagues, is that these structures do not only have to meet, in a formal setting of a meeting. There are even WhatsApp groups that are created just specifically for these structures to communicate so that they can adequately respond when there is a victim that needs support. And so also included when it comes to the establishment of these structures is the fact that there needs to be a implementation plan. We call it a multi-stakeholder implementation plan on how gender-based violence, is going to be handled by each of these institutions. They have to come up, this rapid response team have to come up with a plan, that identifies the roles of each of these stakeholders in fighting gender-based violence in the whether it be at the local municipality level or at the district municipality level. So I think the emphasis here, colleagues, is that the structures, these multi-stakeholder structures, are not supposed to be only confined being reactionary, meaning reacting when there is an incident, but there needs to be a plan, at the local and district municipality level, a multi-stakeholder plan that indicates exactly what each stakeholder is supposed to be doing according to their mandate when it comes to fighting gender-based violence. And the purpose of these structures is to coordinate, all these interventions and make sure that there is continuous reporting by the various stakeholders that are part of these structures, but also to ensure that all these stakeholders that are part of the rapid response teams, they hold each other accountable, to say that this is the progress, what are the challenges, where can we post, where can we assist as the different stakeholders to make sure that some of the challenges that you are indicating are resolved. So the different types of institutions that are often represented in these rapid response teams, you obviously will have your departments, the service departments, you have your SAPS, that is the police, the Department of Social Development, representation from health, justice, you have NPA, Department of Education, community services, you have municipalities that are represented, you have civil society organizations that are represented in the form of the NGOs that deal with gender-based violence. You even have shelters that are represented, institutions from the religious sector, traditional leadership, traditional leaders. So colleagues, even the private sector is supposed to be represented in these rapid response teams. Basically, the purpose is to ensure that all institutions, that have a role in fighting gender-based violence are part of these structures, and they identify their role. They implement what they are supposed to implement, and they hold each other accountable towards implementing whatever has been identified in the plan. So continuing with the localization, we also, colleagues, also focus on the issue of municipalities, because I think most people now, in fact, municipalities have also reflected this, that their plans, the plans of municipalities don't say much about gender-based violence. What role are municipalities supposed to play when it comes to supporting organizations that fight gender-based violence, when it comes to them making contribution towards, specific interventions, up to even when it comes to them supporting even the shelters, because we know that municipalities, they've got bylaws, there are issues around taxation, which also affect shelters. So the roles of the municipality needs to be very clear on how they will support these institutions, specifically, referring to shelter. So as the department, we have been doing, so far we have been reviewing the plans of municipalities to look at how much are they integrating the priorities of the National Strategic Plan on Gender-Based Violence. And there are some of the findings include the fact that municipalities, are not currently at a stage where they are able to link, their mandates, specifically their services, to gender-based violence and femicide prevention. Let me just make an example. Just provision of street lights is the mandate of municipalities. Street lights, they contribute towards a safe environment, especially at night, and as a result, they contribute towards a reduction of cases of rape. But the current plans of municipalities do not even mention that. It's just about the services that they have to provide. It's their mandate to ensure that the parks that are being provided are safe, to provide multi-purpose center, the issues around drug prevention, programs on youth development and all that. All these, they contribute towards, ensuring safe environment, towards ensuring that there is prevention of gender-based, but all of this information that I'm talking about now is not reflected in all of the plans of municipalities. So the department is currently working with reviewing some of these plans of municipalities so that, it's not only review, we give them feedback, with regards to this is how you can structure your plans, whether it be your integrated development plan, whether it be a district development plan or local economic development, to ensure that you link with issues of gender-based violence. So here, colleagues, I'm also talking about the local economic development plan, because you can remember that the NSP has got Pillar 5, the Pillar 5 that focuses on economic power, So these are the things that are supposed to be also addressed, plans around ensuring access to resources and facilities, So that is, those are the areas that we look at. So we also advise them, when we are giving feedback to municipalities around what they are supposed to be including in their plan, we also, advisement to look at, even their bylaws, how can they link their bylaws such that they provide real support, to organizations, to NGOs, specifically shelters, that provide support to the victims of gender-based violence and, of gender-based violence. And so we give a feedback to municipalities so that they can improve, their plans. So in this task, we are also working closely with SALGA and COCTA, because we know their role. SALGA, their main role is basically around supporting municipalities, especially political leadership, so that they can play their oversight role to make sure that the municipalities, have plans that, reflect certain priorities. And here we are specifically looking at the municipalities, specifically the councillors and the mayors, being active role players in providing oversight to ensure that the municipalities cater for issues of gender-based violence in their plans. So as a result, we've done a capacity building. We've worked with SALGA to just share information with councillors, especially the new leadership, on gender-based violence and their oversight role when it comes to them ensuring that municipalities implement the priorities of the National Strategic Plan on Gender-Based Violence. We also work with COCTA because we also know they've got a regulatory role when it comes to supporting municipalities. So one of our aim is to ensure that their assessment tools and the guidelines that they use, they must include the priorities, the indicators of the National Strategic Plan on Gender-Based Violence. So this information basically specifically refers then to shelters, how is the work with shelters in relation to this localization that we are talking about. Firstly, here, what I can say is that shelters, are members of the gender-based violence and femicide rapid response teams that I've spoken about. We have established a rapid response teams at district and local municipality level, in KwaZulu-Natal so far, the Eastern Cape, the Northern Cape, and Mpumalanga. So shelters in this, especially at the local municipality level, shelters are members of these rapid response teams together with the other NGOs, the other government departments. So what is happening specifically with the different stakeholders that are represented in these rapid response teams? All the stakeholders are expected to be clear, to indicate what their plan is. towards fighting gender-based violence? What is their plan towards supporting victims of gender-based violence? So all these plans are put together to become a plan for the rapid response team, a plan that is going to be coded. It's not necessarily implemented by the rapid response team, but the rapid response team coordinates. It ensures that all the stakeholders, that are represented in this rapid response team, they account on what they are, what their initiatives are, including the government departments. So shelters are part of these groups. They develop they are supposed to be submitting also their plans, so that their plans also form part of this local municipality rapid response team that also needs to be monitored. So I've spoken about the monitoring of these plans and the continuous reporting. And so what usually happens is that these rapid response teams, they meet on a quarterly basis, where reports are made by each of these stakeholders to say that this is how far we are, these are the challenges we are experiencing, and this is where we need support, and so far and so far. So for me, colleagues, for shelters, this presents an opportunity, because I think shelters, like the other NGOs, will not only have to report to their funders about their challenges, about where they need support, because some of the support that is needed by shelters may be provided at local level by the municipality in some cases, or even by other departments in some cases. So these rapid response teams, they provide opportunities for shelters to also share with the locals, including municipality, the challenges that are being experienced, and even make recommendations on how some of these problems can be resolved. So on my right hand side here, I'm just giving examples of the rapid response teams, areas where we have established rapid response teams. I've indicated that we have some in Newlands, in Inandantu, Zuma, Kwamashu, and all these areas that I have listed here. And shelters, again, are members of most of these rapid response teams that I've indicated here. So during these rapid response teams, when they are being formed, what happens is the different stakeholders usually list the main concerns that they have with regards to the services that they are providing and their institutions. And what I've listed here are the challenges, that have been reported by the shelters during these rapid response team meetings before they even formed the implementation plan for the rapid response teams. So I've listed here about 7 of these. And one of the main concerns that they have expressed is around security. The security concerns, up to even staff members of the shelter saying that, hey, we fear for our lives here because we have issues around. There are no cameras, there are no security guards. This was a special concern that was expressed by shelters that are located in the Eastern Cape, in Butterworth, Aidutwa, and I think in Tendane. Okay. Another challenge, I'm sure this is not new to you, the second part here, the funding gap that results into shelters not being able to, to provide for the people they are sheltering, So one of the concerns that they expressed was that, they are provided with funding by the Department of Social Development up until March. So in March, the financial year ends, So they are saying that for them, this is the last time they see funding. And then the next funding that they usually receive is from August, So this surviving between April, May, June, July is a serious problem for these shelters, because during that time they indicated that they are not receiving funding. As a result, they have to get money, from, they really struggle during this period. So they also expressed that challenge. Another challenge that they expressed is it's lack of confidentiality. Most shelters, they usually work closely with police. So they have indicated that in some cases, the police, they provide this information to shelters with regards to where they are located and all that. So again, that brings up the issues around security of both the shelter staff members and the victims that they are sheltering. Community members, again, giving information to other community members about the whereabouts of the victims, again, that was expressed. But I must again indicate that these are the concerns that were expressed specifically in shelters that are located in Butterworth, Aidutwa, and Tendane in the Eastern Cape. So I'm not sure about, in other areas. yeah, I'm repeating the part about the people who are running shelters fearing for their lives because of safety issues. And then another concern that was expressed again, mostly in the rural shelters, that are shelters that are located, in the rural areas, was, some of people even using their own houses, to shelter victims because of loss of property, the owner taking back their house and then having to use their own house and all that. So there are serious challenges, colleagues, of which I believe that you are looking at some of this, but I'm just making these reports because I can't finish this presentation without, just giving you feedback with regards to the information that has been gathered from the rapid response teams, that have been established. But also, I think that something positive was the fact that some of these shelters, especially these ones in the rural areas, they are getting support from the private sector. The private sector, they mentioned things like about cash build. In this specific case, it was the one of the offer that was given was that cash build would build the house. All the shelter needs to do is to identify the space, and they have worked with the municipality, but they never got to get the land to so that this a house that is going to be sponsored by cash could be built. So these are the general challenges, colleagues, that have been reported by shelter. So what we have done as the department, because we've got pillar task teams, okay? So what we have done as departments, we have forwarded these challenges, firstly to the Department of Social Development, but they have also been discussed in the pillar collective, where we have got Department of Social Development represented, but also where we've got other NGOs represented, so that solutions to this can be identified. But most of these, they apply mainly to the Department of Social Development. Colleagues, that is it from my side. Thank you very much for your patience, and I'm sorry I could not join you. I'm attending a strategy planning session from our department. Thank you.
Are located more or less in the Eastern Cape. Now, at the National Shelter Movement, we have 95 affiliated shelters across the country, and more than 30 hotspots has been identified by President Ramaphosa. So my question is, what possibilities exist for RRTs to be established in the rest of the areas where shelters exist? Because this would then promote pillar one in terms of accountability and leadership. Thank you.
Is there another hand? Okay. Could we get a response to that question? Is Nomsa still online?
Okay. Yes, I'm still online. Thank you very much for this question. You see, as a department, we do not have capacity to be able to establish rapid response teams in all up to even local municipalities. But what we are busy doing is we are working with Office on Status of Women. We are also working with districts, district municipalities, so that we can support them to be able to establish these rapid response teams at that level, at local municipality level, because I think this is how it's supposed to work. There's supposed to be a rapid response team at a local municipality level, and another rapid response team at district level, where the local level rapid response team are reporting to, and so on. It goes up to the province. So we are currently working with the Office on Status of Women. We are working with the districts, to make sure that, they extend, this service of establishing rapid response teams and making sure that they are functional. Ne? I think that's the first part. But secondly, we are, as I indicated earlier on, we've got COGTA, we also have got SALGA, So we are also working with them to ensure that they, specifically SALGA, because SALGA plays a very key role in supporting municipalities. So we are working with them so that they can transfer some of this responsibility to their political leadership, because, for example, mayors and councillors are supposed to be the ones who are leading these rapid response teams. So if these stakeholders, if the mayors, if the councillors are active in this, obviously with the help of the civil society organizations, if they are active in ensuring that these are functional, then the shelters would also be represented there because they are a key stakeholder that services victims of gender-based violence. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Is there any other burning question? Can't see hands, with the lights. Okay, thanks very much. Thank you very much, and thank you for spending time with us. Our next presentation, I'll just find it for you. Our next presentation is from, I'm opening the bio quickly. And it's Mr. Sibusiso Malope, who's been attending our meeting, the past 2 days, and also co-funding through the Department of Social Development. But Sibusiso is a social work graduate from the University of Pretoria 16 years ago. His first work experience as social worker dates back to 2005. At the then Pretoria Children Welfare. He has a good combination of work experience from both private and public sector, and currently serving the DSD National Department as the Director for Victim Empowerment and Prevention of GBV. He has completed his master's course with pending research in public management and governance from the Northwest University Potchefstroom College. I'll just load the presentation now. Hey? Email, I know. Thank
you. Thank you, Program Director. I'm glad it doesn't say where I was born, because I was going to feel like it's an obituary. Colleagues, I'm going to be very quick. I have been delegated to present on the NSP Pillar 4. Apologies that I am going to be reflecting the DSD theme, but it's a pillar matter, although DSD is leading Pillar 4 in terms of the chairperson that is chairing the Pillar 4 work stream, which is Ms. Cesar Mahangwe, and then she's leading it with a colleague from civil society. So it is a pillar that we will all know that it's talking to response, care, support, and healing. And I'm going to skip some of the slides because they were covered by the previous speaker, as well as Ms. Mtembu, who SIPS also covered some of the information that is before us, so I'm not going to go into it. The brief that I have is that I need to just talk to, we've got this Pillar 4, and what does Pillar 4, what is Pillar 4 expected to deliver? And because of time, I must say that we will just present amongst others. There's far more that Pillar 4 is doing, so we'll present a few or some of the things that Pillar 4 has delivered on and still to deliver on. The reason DSD obviously is leading this pillar is because the responsibilities of this pillar, which is response, care, support, and healing, falls squarely within the mandate of DSD. Obviously, we've got civil society as implementing partners in the delivery of the expectation of Pillar 4, hence the partnership into this. All the pillars will know that they were established in July, immediately after the President has launched the NSP on the 11th of March of 2020, then July, all the pillars were established, and you can see the different responsibilities of the pillar. It's clear that every pillar is expected on a monthly basis to report to presidency in terms of its work, and Pillar 4 does the same. In fact, from my team, National DSD is responsible for consolidating the work of the pillar supported by CSOs. The colleague that is here in the room, Mr. Tumeling, he is the one that is responsible for consolidation, the work of Pillar 4 from the department side. And this also includes getting reports from civil society. I like this proverb: if you want to go far, go alone, and if you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, go together. It's an African proverb that I think it's one of the things that we are realizing, that if government want to go fast and make mistakes, government will have to go alone. But if we have to go far and achieve more, we have to go as a team. And that is why we've got this partnership that we're able to deliver on this successful session with NSM and other stakeholders here. So Pillar 4, colleagues, looks at strengthening existing response care support services by the state, civil society in a way that is victim-centered and survivally focused, and trauma-informed to facilitate recovery and healing. And I must say that within that, you will see also that some of our work cut across other pillars. For example, when we talk about legislation will be feeding onto another pillar, but it's delivered in Pillar 4 in terms of the content. Because when we talk about the white paper on social development, it's sitting with DSD. You then talk about the victim support services bill, it's also sitting with DSD, and it's developed from DSD side. So the pillar has been responsible in pushing that, and some of you stakeholders will know that where we are now is that both the bills, which is the welfare one, as well as the VSS, which I know that we all have interest on, and we are actually becoming worried that there's going to be change of administration and whether will this go through. I must say that from our side, we are working so much to ensure that these bills go through, because you know that if we miss the 6th administration, we might start from the scratch in the next administration. So we are very mindful of that the VSS bill needs to be finalized as this white paper as well in the current administration. As we speak, in this very same year, the white paper on social development has been to Cabinet. Cabinet referred us back to NEDLEC, but the VSS bill, it went to Cabinet in 2019, just before COVID. We were referred for public comments. We went for public comments. We then took it back to the Office of the State Law Advisors, which currently there is that back and forth between us and the Office of the State Law Advisors. In that process as well, we've initiated the process of drafting the regulations. And you will remember between February, May, and July this year, we had workshops on the drafting of the regulations. The reason we are trying to run the process of the bill and regulations together is so that as soon as the bill is passed, we are ready to move with speed. And this we are learning from experiences, for example, the Children's Act, where you've had the legislation, and for 5 years we could not implement because the regulations were not ready. So we're working tirelessly on that. The other activity around that also, in terms of legislation policy framework, was that one of developing 2 policies to standardize services. You will know there's an intersectoral shelter policy as well as the psychosocial, the provision of psychosocial services policy. These are 2 critical policies that we have developed, and this pillar is overseeing that. The development of that, like I'm saying, they talk to the issue of ensuring that we standardize service to prevent secondary victimization, but also it is also guided by Chapter 9 institution, that especially the intersectoral shelter policy, to say the challenges around the issues of shelter. You know, And the good thing about that policy specifically, I think it's critical for me to say it here, is that it is now going to cabinet. And for it going to cabinet is really a good thing, because now it outlines responsibilities of other departments that are responsible in assisting on the implementation. And when it's going to cabinet, it means that every minister responsible in executing issues of shelters can be easily held accountable. For example, we have a challenge currently where we are saying not everybody is coming to the party. Human settlement, SAPs, and so forth. So when the policy gets presented in cabinet, we are hoping and believing that at that point we can be able to use this policy to hold our other stakeholders to account. We also intensified services at the command center, but I don't want to go into detail with that, except saying we've expanded as a pillar. We've expanded the GPVCC. Initially, it could only host a complement of staff of about 15 in the previous infrastructure, and now we moved into a new infrastructure provided by Department of Public Works, which has doubled that capacity to about 30, and when there's a need, we are able to increase the capacity. That's part of the work of this pillar. I think Minister yesterday spoke about the funding of CARA, so I'm not going to go into it, but safe to say that 360 CSOs and mostly emerging ones have benefited in the 100 million that we got through CARA. CARA, you will know, colleagues, is the criminal asset recovery accounts, so we were able to get that fund. We've also recently conducted a number of capacity building on provision of psychosocial services policy, which is very key, because if you will know that the policy starts to clearly define responsibilities, because with GPV being a pandemic, we are getting a lot of persons moving into a space and they are creating more damage than good. So the policy begins to say who should be in their space, what is their role that they need to play, which is something that is important. I thought I must also highlight again to say in the current financial year, what has been the funding situation in terms of the department, how much has been dispersed to CSOs by government. I know that sometimes you're sitting there, colleague, and thinking, out of that 34 million in Gauteng, I only got 100,000. It's because you can see that you're not the only one in Gauteng. There's quite a number of organizations, but safe to say about 178 million, and this excludes Limpopo, that has been actually this year alone budgeted to funding of CSOs as part of the work of this very same pillar. Public buildings made available, I think the DG spoke to that earlier on, but it's also work that is from the pillar. This one is very important, colleagues, for me to highlight that although the unoccupied buildings by Public Works will be handed over to DSD, fast and quick implementation of it will have to be through the CSOs because of obvious reasons. Part of them, there are dynamics around how a building can actually be transferred from government to government. But for it to make it available to be used by CSOs, it will be much quicker. That is why even in Gauteng, you will see that some of the buildings that are going to be handed over will be, the department will go into a partnership with a CSO to run the facility. And in any case, you will know that most of the shelters in the country are running through civil society organization as an implementing partner. So I want to say that that is also the other plan. I think Tichi also spoke about the number of shelters that we have in the country vis-a-vis the districts that are without shelters. It's work of this pillar to ensure that all 52 districts are covered with shelters. It is also work of this pillar to ensure that we've got the 6 new Khuseleka one-stop centers that are currently missing in other provinces. And I think I can also say here that one of the organizations that we are considering for the model of Khuseleka One-Stop Center is Sarki Parkman in the Western Cape, as well as in Mpumalanga, and that we are hoping to achieve by end of this financial year, which is March 2023. Deployment of social workers that are specific to providing services to GPV victims. It's a new model that we are looking at to say if we are to deal with a pandemic and we are to respond in a pandemic situation, we do need to have a dedicated workforce for GPV. And hence we have deployed those different social service practitioners. We've got social workers that were appointed as of 2018-19, about 200 of them. We've recently also, they are not interns, it's contract workers of about 50 social workers that we deployed in the 30 GPV hotspot areas. And then we've also deployed through this pillar 100 gender-based violence ambassadors. And these, some of them, they are funded by developmental partners. Miriam is already intimidating me. Intimidating the chairperson, the program director. I am closing. We've had a dialogue as a pillar in Ikageng hotspot just in this past week on Monday. And I just got the report this morning just to highlight a few of the emerging issues. Some of them, it's issues that we know, they are not new colleagues, but it's key that I highlight them. There's issues around the lack of specific indicators in our implementation, which it's a challenge when it comes to reporting on the work of the pillar. There's continued absence of some critical stakeholders. I think it's something that we've been talking about as well, to say there are people in the who are critical stakeholders that are missing. Health is one. I mean, in terms of the mental health issues that we need in our services in the shelter. There's also reliance on processes outside of our control. There's delays in implementation of legislation. We know there's 3 new legislations that we just passed recently, DVA being one, SORMA, and the criminal and related matters, which talks to bail and parole. So the implementation of those, and then lack of mainstreaming in terms of the NSP, and then unexpected disasters that we're sometimes not ready to. These are things that emerge in the dialogue, colleagues. So they will be tightened in terms of the finding vis-a-vis what is proposed. And lack of baseline data and disaggregated data in the sector. And this is one very important thing, colleagues. And I think civil society organizations are key in assisting us to generate data if we are to deal with the pandemic of GPV. The last one, that is emerging, there are more, I just summarized, lack of intersectionality. This one is actually what we call the silo approach into delivery of services. Challenges, those were key that came from the summit, from the dialogue, and then challenges we know. budget. I wish we can achieve adequate, but we will achieve, actually, we need to prioritize GPV. And I think we spoke about that a lot yesterday, even in terms of how we respond to issues of GPV, whether are all of us in the sector responding accordingly to show that it's a priority. Victim-friendly facility role clarification, it's an issue, colleagues, that I think it's critical that we also don't overlook it. The fact that we need to have the victim-friendly facilities in police station and issues of GPV, because they are a hindrance in cases being reported. Civil society organization accountability, to some extent, colleagues, you guys don't want to account. And I understand that sometimes it's because how do you account for money that doesn't come from somebody? You want to account where the money comes from. But issues of accountability are key. Lack of technical capability in the implementation of this the pillar, and lack of participation from various stakeholders. We are still lacking some critical stakeholders in the pillar 4, and I can't say who are they, but that is a gap that we have there, especially private sector. By private sector, I'm talking about companies that are supposed to assist in the fight against GPV. Thank you so much, Program Director.
Can we take 2 questions? And I know the question there, so stand here so that you can respond. There were daggers flying from that side in the room, so just if you can answer the question, because I saw the daggers coming. If you could just, can we take your question, Benny?
Thank you, Sibisiso. That was a wonderful presentation. So you spoke earlier about the standardization approach to sheltering and the intersectoral policy that's now going to Cabinet. I would like to know, and I'm not going to ask you what happened to the 1.6 billion, but I would like to know whether you have started working in conjunction with that policy on a standardized funding model.
I'm going to take one more question. Zubaira, did you have a question about? Okay, you leave it. Right. Okay, if you can respond to that.
Hello? Hello?
Is it online? Is there a question online? Okay, there was some noise. Okay. Okay, I'm going to ask one question and then, time is running out and we've got a press conference and stuff and we want Joy to do the wrap up. So if you can respond, Sibusisi, to that question, thank you. And then Joy, if you can come forward to do the wrap up.
Thank you for the question, Advocate. I want to say we are currently, in fact, for the legislation of VSS, we are working on a detailed costing of its rollout. And with the very same policy, you will know that as soon as you present it in cabinet, the next thing will be how is it going to be operationalized. So we would be working on a costing, but I can't say it's going to be an independent funding model specifically for shelters, but it's going to be a costing that talks to how are we going to operationalize this policy. And I believe that chances are we might be asked to say go consult on it, which might delay the process, but it will be the best thing to do, so that when we consulting it, that is the time that then we will have a discussion to say how possible would it be that will operationalize this. But I can confirm that the VSS one, definitely the costing is underway, and even with this one, as soon as it's in cabinet, Minister of Police, for example, can ask to say, the policy expect the following from me, so which means I need to have a budget to execute. And with all the policies and legislation of it, that is the expectation that you must have a costing and say how exactly is it going to be possible to implement. So that will be my response. I know it's not direct. We've got a sector funding model, though, that has been approved by MINMEC, and I know that there are guidelines that we are working on currently in terms of implementation. Yeah.
Thank you. And can I ask you, is there some attention being given to the fact that we need a standardized funding model that is multi-year, so we can move away from this, each province is working on a different model, and also moving away from the one-year funding cycle, which just puts shelters in a place where they don't feel things are sustainable?
There is, Advocate. In fact, tomorrow we have a preparation for the summit SDSD, and one of the items within the branch community development, there's an expectation, which is leading the NPO. There's an expectation that we must indicate how are we going to be responding to that in the summit around a funding model for CSOs. So there is that work, but it's not work that has unfortunately started. It's work that we've got to start, because those questions will come as much as they're already coming now from here. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So just a small gift.
I need to declare.
You can declare. So just a small gift from NSM. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Program
Thank you.
Director.
Hello? Hello? Hello?
Is there a question?
Hello?
Is there a question online? Okay. Can you go
Yes,
ahead?
it's a question, please.
Can you go ahead with your question, please?
Yes, my name is Bernard from Limpopo Mirror newspaper. I am trying to find out, where does the police and NPOs draw lines? Because we have NPOs saying the police, they are actually interfering with the day-to-day running of the NPOs on victim empowerment. So how can you separate these? And now this has led to the closure of Songozi victim empowerment, because they were accommodated at a police property.
Is that question for Sibisiso? Can you respond? And if your response can be brief, please, just in terms of time. Thank you.
Thank you, colleague. I understand you from Limpopo. Is it Mpumalanga? But I think...
No, it's Limpopo.
It's Limpopo, yeah. We have started a process where we drafted memorandum of understanding between DSD and SAPS in terms of the implementation of what we call the very same thing I was talking about, the victim-friendly room or victim-friendly facilities. And the way I understand your question, it talks to exactly that, because now if you've got a victim-friendly room or facility in the police station, it's normally run by an NGO, and sometimes you find that there's an interference from the police, feeling that that is their space, so they are the ones that should be leading the service. It is a challenge now because there isn't a formal agreement, and we are working on that now. In fact, it's in our operational plans from the victim empowerment technical to say we need to have a formal memorandum of understanding to say who does what in terms of the victim-friendly facilities. So, and in case I'm not responding specifically, please put your detail in the chat, and I'll ask my colleagues from here so that they share your details, and then we can engage beyond. Thank you, Indaba.
Thank you so much. I'm putting my details now.
Good afternoon, everyone. I was asked to be very brief because we also still have a press conference to go to. So I'll start off with just a brief relay of what took place today. I'll start with the presentation that we had by the DDG, Mr. Linton Manchu. And what we took out of this was that he emphasized the need to take accountability, for us all to take accountability for what we have done and what we have not done. And also for us to look at the inputs to Pillar 4 as it relates to the infrastructure provision. And through that we cannot do this if there is no multi-sectoral approach. And this is required if we want to really provide the sheltering services to victims. And this process, he said that this process can only be finalized with public works in terms of infrastructure provision, and that is working in terms of a multi-sectoral approach, for example, with human settlements, with the special needs housing, the MPO implementation partners, and he also highlighted challenges in providing services, sheltering services. One of the things that also came out was that shelters are grossly underfunded, and I think that is something that we've experienced for the past 2 days. And also the lack of services and provision for the LGBTIQ community, as well as persons with disabilities. He emphasized again that GBV requires all of us to work in unison, and that we must drive a common message if we want to eradicate GBVF. And this Indaba has shown that there is space to work together. We also heard that the second stage housing policy is en route to Parliament, and discussions are in process in addressing empty buildings with public works that have indicated that there is space for sheltering and shelter services, because we know that there's a lack of shelters in the country. Mr. Butikolwane shared with us around the care and support to TIP victims, trafficking in person victims, and it was quite powerful in how Bhuti started the presentation, sharing with us that trafficking in persons is an age-old thing. When he shared with us the issues or the story of Sarki Bartman, and that it took place in the 19th century already. And that all of us have a responsibility to break the trafficking in persons network, because it is a crime that is hidden. And we also need to look at how do we require a safe and a trusting space for victims and for staff members. And this can only be done through trauma-informed care and support that must be practiced and that should be practiced in shelters, so that not only victims but shelter staff members also feel safe and that it is a trusting space. We mentioned the challenges, and I mentioned trafficking in persons, that it's a hidden crime. And also the challenge of the aftercare for victims is a problem, trafficking in persons victims, because there is no provision for support when they want to move forward. And this is in terms of economic empowerment, lack of housing and all of that. And then when we move on, the next presentation was the link between substance abuse and sheltering by Mr. Mandla Shuma. And here we saw the impacts of substance abuse, specifically alcohol abuse, and the contributing factors that it has to social ills, and what it contributes to in terms of increased unemployment, the lack of affordable housing, the issues of homeless people, and also social isolation and what that causes. We also spoke of the fact that substance use often leads to take or push people out of their homes, and it leads to a lack of sheltering. And that what was key was that we need sustainable spaces for us and for people to be able to survive. And it also showed us that there's a flip side of substance abuse, because on the flip side, people run away from their home due to substance abuse in the home. And you know, that leads to adverse childhood experiences and all the social ills and challenges that we face. And then we had the presentation of Ms. Lisa Nall, the effects of repeated traumas in children. And she emphasized the fact that trauma breaks trust in children who actually sought to trust and speak openly and honestly to those around them. And then adults come around and then they change that truth. And that affects a child throughout their lives. And she also emphasized the importance that we need to cover all aspects of the human being in terms of the spiritual aspect and everything that goes along to the human being. Then we had the presentation of Dr. Gustav Wolfgaard from the Foundation for Professional Development, and he was looking at dealing with burnout from a managerial perspective. And he was looking at how do we reduce the risk factors of driving burnout. And I think we were all going to the internet looking at the Oldenburg Burnout Inventory online tool, which we are going to practice. I'm going to ask my team members to also look at that. And I think it is quite critical for us to actually do this on a monthly basis, as he also stated that he does that. And there's a need, he emphasized the need for a call to action for us to address mental health care. And that there's a move, and we've seen this globally in terms of people identifying that mental health is actually a pandemic. And in South Africa, we are not that well resourced to be able to deal with the issues of mental health. Yes, we can deal with the common issues of mental health, but yeah, we are not well resourced. He also shared that NGOs provide essential services that can help with the common mental health issues. But when it comes to women presenting with more serious mental health issues, that becomes a challenge. And then it becomes a challenge with going to the Department of Mental Health. And again, we can see the linkages and the lack of the multi-sectoral approach, if we could just get that going. And then he spoke to us all in terms of us identifying and looking at self-care, and also having a balance between work and private life. Okay, and when I move on, we had SIBS present what the NSP on GBVF is about for the second GBVF summit. And the theme for, I found that quite amazing, that the theme for the second GBVF summit is focused on accountability, acceleration, and amplification, which is in line with the summit, with the conference that we're having here now as well, which speaks to accountability, leadership, and coordination. So there's a synergy between the two of us. She, SIBS, shared with us the GBVF roadmap to date, and we could clearly depict what we still need to do, and take accountability for that. And also the 24, we could see the 24 demands that was had. And what was great was that the multi-sectoral structure that was formed, we know that the needs weren't met. However, we know that 51% of CSOs make up the body of the steering committee, and the rest is from government departments as well. She shared with us the challenges with implementing the national strategic plan. And the example that she used was that we're supposed to be having a men's shelter in every province, and today we still only have one shelter for males. And so we really need to look at getting that right. I just want to see what. She also shared with us the summit objectives. And the first one that she shared was that we need to ensure that gender-based violence and femicide stays on a high level, and that we need to keep it at number one, and that is all our responsibility. We also need to accelerate actions and accountability by key government departments. And there needs to be a space that needs to be provided for collaborative engagement, because this will be key, and it is key to achieving our objectives. And then we had Ms. Nomsa Nabu share with us on Pillar 1. And we also heard again that it's all of us, all our responsibility, living in South Africa, CSOs, private sector, government, to achieve Pillar 1. The challenges that she reported, challenges reported by shelters in GBVF, in terms of rapid response teams, which is quite common, not just for the rapid response teams, but for shelters as well, is the safety and the security concern. That was the first one. And then she also highlighted the funding gap, and she used the example of the delay in funding to the Eastern Cape. She also spoke on the lack of confidentiality about people being in shelters, and where this information is often shared by SAPS. And those who run shelters fear for their lives at times. And what was also critical that was highlighted, because this is a challenge that many shelters face, is where they've received property, for example, from a mine or so, but the municipality is lacking in handing over the papers in terms of handing over the land into their name. When we look at the following presentation was around Pillar 4, which Sibusiso did for us, and he presented a few of the key expectations that must come out. And the key expectations, one of the key expectations was that every pillar is expected to report to the presidency on a monthly basis. And this makes it actually quite pertinent that, I mean, it just shows the high level of the importance of this NSP. We also heard that the Victim Support Services Bill is to be finalized, and that they are working hard to achieve this. And it's going on its way to Cabinet. And what that then means is that every minister that must execute the activities can be held accountable. I've been shown time constraints, so I'm going to move. I'm just going to highlight the challenges. He mentioned budget, that we need to prioritize gender-based violence and femicide, and the lack of victim-friendly rooms, which is what I took out of. And now I know that time is short. I'm going to move over to the resolutions that we took out of the past 2 days, and would like to get your input on it. So the resolutions that we came up with in line with the Indaba theme for the past 2 days was accountability, coordination, and leadership, which speaks right into Pillar 1 of the NSP. And this is what we'd like to take to the second summit in November. Number 1, funding. I think that's a theme that came through. Adequate, standardized, 3-year funding, a 3-year funding model that must be standardized nationally. Number 2, look at an integration of a multi-sectoral approach between civil society, private sector, and government. And we heard this morning we got an undertaking from the DG to bring key stakeholders, including SAPS, into the room, including local municipalities, and establishing a link between the TCCs to see victims before they enter into a shelter. Number 3, develop a model for shelters on mental health, not just for survivors, but for staff and managers, bringing in relevant stakeholders like the Foundation for Professional Development. The 4th one is to advocate to fast-track special needs housing, the special needs housing policy at all levels, because we know that this has been a process that has started in 2015 already. The fifth one was the adoption of the Shelter Action Learning Program nationally. So yeah, I can just get your take on that.
Thank you very much, Joy, for the resolutions. And just because of time constraint, we're not going to get feedback from the floor. Just there's not enough time because we've got 2 items still that we want to handle. And Zubaida, if you can come forward, and should we call the relevant person forward? Fazani, if we can call you to the front, please. You didn't do something wrong, but just come to the front. Fazani, you come to the front, and then, just have something to do, and then Zubaida will also do the vote of thanks. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Sharon. So, 1 second, I'll let you know. So thank you very much for that, Sharon. I just want to, before I give the vote of thanks to those involved in making this Indaba a huge success, want to say thank you and goodbye to Fisani, who's been an executive member of the National Shelter Movement, and she's going to be leaving us for greener pastures. And I'd just like to, say a few words in that respect. I've had the honor of working closely with Fisani as part of the NSMS Exco for the past 3 years. Your passion, your commitment, and your dedication to uplifting the most vulnerable members of society was inspiring, Fisani. You could always be relied on to offer insightful, measured, and comprehensive input into how best to serve the needs of survivors on the ground. You were an incredible pillar of support for all of us through very challenging times. You never dropped the ball at any point. You are and always will remain our dear sister, and you will be dearly missed. So we wish you well in your new endeavors. And this is on behalf of all the NSM staff, members, affiliates, everybody. So on behalf of them, I'd like to give this gift to you. And I'd like Fisani to say a few words.
Thank you so much, Dr. Z. I just hope I was a little bit prepared. I didn't think it's going to be here, but nonetheless, I think really one has to, take a deep sigh, because it has been a journey, colleagues. I think I've shared with colleagues from different spaces when we're networking, sitting here, that when you travel so long, you never think that one day is going to be a time to say goodbye to a sector and to a place that you have called home for a very long time. But I think ending it on this note, really, I think it is really a high note. Miriam said yesterday when I was coming from that place that I came from, I just want to leave my colleagues, the NSM family, the sheltering sector family, with these words. And I said this yesterday, maybe I was preparing my speech yesterday when I was talking to Claudia on our way to and back from Pretoria, that we should not think of women like in large numbers. When you have to make an impact, do not want to make it for a lot of women at a go, or for those of you who are not in the women sector or in the women and children sector, do not want to concern yourself about touching a lot of women at a go or in your lifetime. But try your best to make sure that that one woman who comes to you and wants you to listen to them, do your best with one woman and listen to their testimony. Seek to understand what impact you have made in their life. And surely, if you hear them giving you feedback, it will give you more energy to even touch more lives. It is a difficult space that we work in, and sometimes you can be frustrated, you can have sleepless nights. I know I'm coming from that because there are times when you'll be up at 2 a.m. thinking of what am I going to feed the women that are in my care, because it happens in this sector. It's not all the times that you're going to have resources to do so. But if you always think of the
Recording
one impact
stopped.
that you are making in the lives of, can it be either a child in your care or a woman in your care? Surely you will always be energized and you'll never lose heart in providing services to women. So I leave you, colleagues, not because I really wanted to. If it was up to me, I will remain in the sector, I think, till I retire. But because life has its other purposes, life has its other corners, and now it is a time for me to say, please, you are in good care because we have each other. You are a strong family. You are a united voice, because that's what we're striving for as the National Shelter Movement. So wherever you are, colleagues in the different parts of South Africa, as long as you remain in the affiliation of the NSM, you know you are in a family that cares, and whenever you are struggling, never give up, seek help, contact whoever is next to you. And nowadays, technology has made life very easy. You can always just check the next person in the next province and you'll get that help. So thank you, colleagues, for always being there for me throughout these years. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Visani, for those words of strength. I'm now tasked with saying thank you to everybody involved in making this Indaba and this partnership with DSD a resounding success. And I'd like to start with thanking Professor Tuli Madonsela. And then, of course, I'd like to thank Minister Zulu for her inputs yesterday, and the DG, Mr. Linton Mkunu, Professor Davis, who gave us her input yesterday. In addition to that, all the presenters from DSD, the TCC from the Department of Women, Nom Sanabo, and SIBS from the Presidency, as well as the National Wellness Center, the Foundation for Professional Development, and the Nishtara Rehabilitation Lodge. The facilitators of all the workshops, Advocate Praise Kambula, the presenters of DSD policy workshops, Jorge Tumaleng, as well as Griselda Kutsia, and then Shaida Umar from the Teddy Bear Clinic, Lisa Vetten, who presented on GBV and the role in the pandemic, as well as members of the NISA Institute, Lisha and Gladys Matipa, who presented a second workshop on house mothers. I'd like to say a special thank you to our partners of the Indaba, the National Department of Social Development, and Claudia from the Heinrich Böll Foundation, who's always stood by the NSM, and we really appreciate and value both of you. Mr. Sibosise Malope, Director of VP, we want to say thank you to you and your team for all the help and the support, despite the rocky road we might have been through, and to Emmanuel and OT from the production company. You've really been really excellent in streaming all the presentations to people on social media. And I also want to thank the DSD admin staff and all the comms teams. And then I'd like to thank the board members of the National Shelter Movement, Diane Masawi, Sharon Kota, Lisa Son, and Lesejo Tlwale, all the staff of the NSM and the NISA Institute who have worked tirelessly to ensure the success of the Indaba and for going the extra mile. Guys, I really value and appreciate the help that you have given everybody in this conference and prior to this conference. So I'd like everybody to please applaud them, give them a hand. Thank you. None of them have really been quietly quitting. They've all been on the go and on the ball. And so, in the words of Dr. Gustav, I want to say to all the staff of NISA and NSM, you have the day off on Friday. To prevent burnout, catch up with your families, take the rest that you need to take. I really appreciated the teamwork. It was absolutely outstanding. I could never have done this without any one of you. And this, of course, includes the executives of the NSM, the provincial representatives, and the shelters that are present, as well as the funders who have attended. Finally, and most importantly, I want to thank all the participants of the Indaba, both those that have attended in person, as well as those who took the time to be online virtually, for taking the time to attend the Indaba and for your participation. And finally, I'd like to just call everybody up for a minute. So all the staff of the NSM and NISA, as well as Mr. Malope, Hochi, Buti, and Griselda, if you could all come quickly. I know we're running out of time, but we do have a few minutes just to say thank you and acknowledge that we have worked well together in the end.
So while you're coming up, I think as program director, I still have the last word. And I would like to really thank Dr. Zubaida Dango, because without her leadership, this would not have been possible. I gave her a stress ball today, because, for all the stresses that we've had, it was really just necessary for us to do that. So Zubaida, thank you very much for your leadership, in guiding us through not only the lead up, first of all, to this, and for the 2 days. Thank you very much.
Well, I couldn't have done it without the board of the NSM either. Thank you. You all need to be here.
Yeah.
How are you doing? Well, I didn't bust your chops too much, right?
You did.
A little bit. Not you.
Yeah, you were sending this one before.
I am such a friend. You came back. I thought you left.
No,
You was in
back.
you was in the other breakaway room. How did it go today?
No, it went well.
Attendance?
And I had an audience of 3, and someone connected.
Audience and then one people.
And one. Oh, yeah, I'm sure it's recorded.
I hope I can see it.
No, but it's not facial. I'm not sure.
Lumka. And hit him. Please.
Me and you need to have a conversation around trafficking and sexual exploitation and sex work. But we shall have